Hi, Equals. It's Kim. If I got all my timing this week down right, you're seeing this on Friday. This is currently Sunday, and this is best time for me to do a lot of video making. So here we are on a Sunday. It is the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and I did visit. I got to visit with my family, with my son, his wife, my daughter, her husband, my ex-in-laws, and my former nephew-in-law. Anyway, it was a really good time, actually. Holidays are interesting times, and often for LGBT people, a very, very difficult time. Young people decide to come out to their parents, like especially if they've been off to college, and now they're coming home for their first major holiday. And at college, they've kind of been able to be themselves, and they want to be able to be themselves at home. And so they come home at Thanksgiving, and they decide to come out to their parents. And so sometimes, hopefully, it goes really well, and their parents are affirming. And maybe there's some discussion about what this means in the future or now. All kinds of things might have conversation, but they're essentially affirming conversation. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. And there are families who are rejecting, not affirming, who feel that for a variety of reasons, and we can explore some of them, that they need to do something to fix their child. Most of these families do love their children. They just show it in a way that is not particularly helpful. They probably wouldn't say that. But, you can't beat the gay or the transgender out of your child. It's not somebody coming out to you. Their sexual orientation and their gender identity are core pieces of themselves. You might be able to, and unfortunately I know a lot of these stories, beat them into taking it back, saying, oh no, I was wrong, I'm not. You might be able to beat them into some form of that's basically, I will never engage in homosexual acts. But you don't beat somebody into not being gay and not being transgendered. You can beat them into lying to you is what you can do. You can do the same, not through physical abuse, but through emotional abuse. Tossing your child out of your home, ridiculing them to such a degree that they can no longer stay and live with you. You can, belittle them. There's all kinds of forms of emotional and verbal abuse. You can lock them in a room. There's a lot of things that I've heard the parents do, including sexual abuse. Often there's somebody in the family who decides to say often to lesbians, well, let me show you what being with a real man is like, and then we have sex abuse. As if raping somebody is going to make them more likely to be heterosexual. This one has always escaped me in its logic. Not that a person who's going to engage in that is probably using much logic. But I have heard these stories. All right, so one of the things that I have hoped with these videos is that they go broad, that a lot of people get to see them on YouTube. They just sort of pop up for people. I would love to have this happen for more and more people so that I can find those parents, that I can find those adults and friends in an LGBT person's life who are looking for direction or who are not affirming, and help them to think differently. Interesting. I've been on a journey lately to think differently about some characteristics, personality traits of myself. I'm one of those people who I want to be right all the time. And this includes not trying something at which I might fail because I don't want to be wrong. or not wanting to do something that I think somebody else is going to judge me for because I don't want to be wrong. So it's not just about, whether I can add 2 and 2 and come up with 4. But so I've been learning to think differently about being wrong. And one is that it's not being wrong. It's simply, I've tried this thing, it didn't work out well, or I've tried this thing, somebody else decided to judge me for them. That's their thing. I can make boundaries around that. Okay, I'm going to do this thing, and you don't get to tell me how to do it, all right? But anyway, so I've been thinking about thinking differently a lot lately, and this is also what we're actually asking folks out there in the world who aren't at the affirming stage yet to do. We're asking them to paradigm shift. We're asking them to think differently. And maybe LGBT folks need to think differently too, right? Now, there are a lot of people who've had a lot of trauma in their lives, and this may not be something that they can do right now, but there are a lot of us who can, right? And if we can think differently about folks who are not affirming, maybe we can approach them in a way that helps them to think differently, that brings us all to the understanding that your sexual orientation, your gender identity are core pieces of an individual, and they cannot be changed. The behaviors that come from that core identity, yes, can be modified or engaged in or not engaged in. All of that is possible, but that core identity, your sexual orientation, who you're attracted to, romantically, emotionally, psychologically, and your gender identity, your knowledge of yourself as male or female, or to the degree to which you are male or female, is part of your core identity and not something that's going to be changed. Get people to that point and to understand that they also have a sexual orientation that's part of their core identity, and to realize that when we talk about trying to protect people from bad treatment based on their sexual orientation and gender identity, that it actually means all of us. That core piece of somebody's identity is not something that as a society we say is a reason to discriminate against the person. Usually discrimination, at least with LGBT people, has historically been viewed as a way to do one of two things. Keep LGBT people in the closet, hiding so that they are not visible and nobody has to deal with them. Or to force them to change their behaviors. A lot of people would say the behavior is the whole thing. Change their behaviors to avoid the discrimination. I mean, that's essentially what that's all about. But if we think differently, and those of us who are straight and cisgender, and I'll link a couple of videos above if you need those explained to you, who have moved through the world very smoothly around sexual orientation and gender identity, because as you move from childhood to adolescence to adulthood, your sexual orientation and your gender identity were exactly what society, your parents, your community, your church, your employers expected and thought it would be. That's called privilege. You could call it straight privilege, you can call it cisgender privilege, but when you don't have to worry or think about your sexual orientation and gender identity, that's privilege. It's the same thing with race. If you're white, like myself, I grew up all the time. I didn't have to think about my race or how I moved through the world or how I engaged with law enforcement or other people in positions, white people particularly in positions of authority. I didn't have to think about that. It's called privilege. Right? Same thing for being straight or being cisgender. If we're one of those straight cisgender people who feels threatened somehow by the existence of an LGBT person, whether it's our child and we somehow think it reflects badly on us, or that our church or our community or our employers are going to think negatively about me, the cisgender straight person, because of who my child is. And therefore, my child being LGBT threatens my existence in some way, my social existence, if nothing else. I, as that threatened person, can act out in ways that are not healthy. If we could come to the point where we reduce the threat to the family members of LGBT people, perhaps we can reduce the amount of reaction that they have, hostile reaction that they have, when their children or nieces or nephews or sisters or brothers come out to them, if it's not such a threat to their standing in their community. This means churches have work to do, particularly non-diverse neighborhoods, communities have work to do, and this is both in the people of color communities as well as white communities. Diverse communities tend to have less of an issue around this, but I'm sure that happens anywhere. But we need to learn, and do I know the answer to this? Not quite yet. I'm still working on it. But if we could learn to help other people think differently. So here's for today. 2 questions, and these actually come from a book by Byron Katie. 2 questions that anytime somebody tells you something like, well, homosexuality is sinful, homosexuality will lead to an early death, whatever they say, right? Is to say, is that true? Non-judgmental, is that true? And then give the person an opportunity, and they may or may not, but give the person an opportunity to lay out their thought pattern for you. And then you can say, okay, I hear you. Is that absolutely true? Because if we can get them to think deeper, we might get them to realize that their initial feelings of hostility or whatever actually have a deeper, something else is going on. And if they can face that something else, it might set them up to think differently. So 2 questions. Is that true? Is that absolutely true? I'm going to try it the next time I run into somebody who's hostile. I do on occasion in presentations that I do. Quite often I'm preaching to the choir to start with, but every now and then I do have a situation where somebody is in a presentation who doesn't really want to be there. They're feeling defensive. I'm going to try this out. I'm going to try to see if I can help somebody else think differently. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Hit the red subscribe button to help me get this message out to more people in the world. And hit the little red bell if you want to be notified every time I put up a new video. Have a great weekend, equals. See ya.